the gap, standing for Jesus. Standing in the gap for family and friends. Standing in the gap, one love for all, so we all can make it in.
One of the things God has done, I always like to say, is that He put us in the midst of this world. And some people want to know, why are we in the world? It's so horrible and all that kind of thing, and they want to run away from it. But God didn't put us in the world to run away from it. The Great Commission says that we are to spread the gospel. And so while we're here, that's what we need to do, is spread the gospel. And in order to spread the gospel in our times, because some people say, well, the Bible talks about things 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago. God wants us to work the gospel now, in the midst of what's happening now in current events. And so we've dedicated a certain portion of our study to what we call the Gap News, which will put in context God's Word and current events. And so we produce the Gap News, and Marvel's in charge of that. I don't know what she's got for you, but I got a little hint, though. All right, Marvel.
So, we had 2 horrific hurricanes in the last month that took hundreds of lives, destroyed billions of dollars of property. And now we're recovering. We're recovering from that. We had the Hurricane Helene and then Hurricane Milton. And this one is just talking about what's going on with our ecology.
Asheville, North Carolina, that town is basically cut off from the rest of the state right now. Most of the city is totally submerged in water. You can see a Jeep trying to make its way through the flooding there. Not good at all. The water levels in some spots are as high as street signs. Tree branches, logs, dumpsters floating absolutely everywhere. An old church in the town's historic village has a lot of damage, and the pastor says it's not safe.
Yes, it's historic. Yes, it's beautiful. Yes, it's got an incredible past. There is nothing more important than the lives of the people who make up the church. So no one should come down and risk life and limb for things that we can replace.
And businesses completely underwater. We've seen this in several neighborhoods here where people tell us this was worse than that flood of 100 years ago. That's right. That's the last time this region got hit with a flood this bad, 1916. Now, while there were
The Hurricane Milton was a Category 3 with 120-mile-an-hour winds. In St. Petersburg, the winds ripping the roof off of the Tropicana Stadium, home of the Tampa Bay Rays. First responders have been gathering in that stadium and were moved just before the hurricane blew in. A giant construction crane smashing onto an office building in downtown St. Petersburg, coming straight down. Tonight, there have been hundreds of rescues from the storm surge and flooding. This 14-year-old boy actually rescued from the rising waters, clinging to debris. In Punta Gorda, boats carried by the storm surge left on lawns. Hurricane Milton also spawning 126 tornado warnings across a wide swath of the state, shattering Florida's record for tornado warnings issued in a single day. In the end, more than 36 tornadoes reported on the ground, this giant twister right near Palm Beach. And here in Fort Pierce, violent tornadoes turn homes to splinters.
Shows Hurricane Milton hitting Tampa International Airport. You can see the ferocity of the winds, but the city of Tampa Bay, Florida's 3rd biggest city, was spared a direct hit with the storm's track heading just south of Tampa. Airports in Fort Myers, Tampa, and Orlando are all closed.
This morning, a slow-motion disaster unfolding in Florida. Days after Hurricane Milton slammed the state, runoff from heavy rainfall now making its way into rivers, flooding inland communities.
You see this typical 4-foot fence here. The water's almost up to the top of it.
Rescue crews evacuating hundreds of residents across 3 counties in the Tampa Bay area.
We do get a lot of rescues with people that they get trapped, they're on oxygen, or they're diabetic, they can't get their insulin.
President Joe Biden speaking to survivors of Hurricane Milton Sunday as residents rebuild their homes and communities.
Homeowners have taken a real beating these back-to-back storms, and they're heartbroken and exhausted, and their expenses are piling up.
His trip to Florida coincided with a big announcement: over $600 million in funding for electric grid resilience.
This funding will not only restore power, but will make the region's power system stronger and more capable, and reduce the frequency and duration of power outages, while extreme weather events become more frequent.
It's the second time in 10 days that Biden traveled to Florida, the first coming after the previous Hurricane Helene. Both storms have taken center stage as the election nears. While Biden toured Florida, Vice President Kamala Harris visited North Carolina, a state that Democrats are vying to flip this year.
These hurricanes have revealed heroes around all of us. Heroes who do not ask the injured or stranded, whether they are a Republican or a Democrat, but who simply ask, "Are you okay?"
This morning, Western North Carolina still reeling 10 days after Hurricane Helene made landfall. Vice President Kamala Harris touching down in Charlotte, North Carolina, meeting with survivors.
I think that these moments of crisis bring out some of the best of who we can be and who we are.
Like many disaster responses, recovery efforts are slow and complicated. Many told they may not have running water for weeks. Crews still doing search and rescue.
Our communications are down.
The National Guard invited NBC News to survey the challenges ahead.
We can see things that ground rescuers can't.
I will spin around and come back.
We flew over thick brush and woods, spotting collapsed bridges and roadways as the military and members of FEMA searched for people who might need aid.
We want to be able to provide some hope for the individuals that may still be out there hoping for help.
But the perfect storm of fear and a lack of communication has led to conspiracy theories about the federal response.
And the worst part is
amplified at a recent rally for former President Trump.
They stole the FEMA money just like they stole it from a bank so they could give it to their illegal immigrants.
The White House pushing back.
I mean, it's just categorically false.
In the last 2 years, FEMA has distributed more than $1 billion in taxpayer money to shelter migrants in cities across the U.S. But the White House and FEMA say that's from a separate government program, not for disaster relief, and there's no evidence funds were diverted. The rumors compounding heartbreak as the death toll rises to at least 230 people and almost 160,000 still without power in North Carolina.
I mean, it has been very challenging.
Well, it's been the power out. We're going to have a generator.
But the mission...
Well, I can tell you there are two main messages. Message one, buckle up. We know for certain, 100% certainty, that this means more droughts, more floods, more heat waves, more human reinforced storms, more disease during one generation's time. 2023, the warmest year on record, will be looked back upon as a mild year. Message two, why would the planet come back to 1.5 after overshoot? Well, the answer is very simple. The health of the planet must be kept intact. We must continue having a planet that can absorb 50% of the carbon dioxide. We must have a planet that crosses no tipping points. We must have a planet that remains healthy and keeping heat intact in the ocean. That is why we need planetary boundaries. The planetary boundary framework that defines the 9 Earth system processes that regulates the stability and resilience of the entire planet. Climate, biodiversity, nitrogen, phosphorus, land, fresh water, air pollutants, and chemicals. That is the challenge. To summarize that, there is no 1.5 degrees Celsius delivery on the Paris Agreement by only phasing out fossil fuels. We also need to come back into the safe operating space of the nature-based biodiversity, all the planetary boundaries of nature. This means that science is clear. The window is rapidly closing. But there is still some light in the window. We actually have evidence that we've reached a pivotal point, not only in terms of risk, but also in terms of opportunity to transform the world towards a safe and just future for humanity. Linear change is no longer an option. The only option is exponential change. We know that the only currency that matters is speed and scale. We also need to become stewards of the entire planet. We need to now recognize from local to global level that we're all so intertwined that we must govern the entire planet. I know that is very daunting, but what choice do we have when on the line is the future of our children on planet Earth? And we have the solutions. We know that solving the planet crisis is not utopia. It's not fantasy. We have the solutions for a secure, stable future for humanity. What are those transformations? Well, we know them. It's a rapid transition away from fossil fuels. It is a transition towards circular business models. It is transitioning towards healthy diets from sustainable food systems. And it's not only halting loss of nature, it's also scaling the regeneration and restoration of marine systems, soils, forests, and wetlands. We have solutions for all of these. Just take green energy, which today is cheaper than fossil fuel-based energy. It's our choice that we're facing today.
Right now, the news is a disaster movie. Storms are smashing cities and records crashing through homes and shattering lives. As people struggle to rebuild, more and more are searching for answers. But the truth behind these hurricanes is far more complex than many claim. So how are tropical cyclones connected to climate change? What will the future of these catastrophes look like? And is there anything we can do to shelter from the storms? I'm Adam, a climate scientist with a PhD from Oxford, sharing what you need to know about climate change. And we really need to talk about hurricanes and climate change because everyone else is, and sometimes that conversation isn't exactly the most informative. It feels like depending on where you look, you'll either see these weather disasters described as storms caused by the fossil fuel industry, or you'll hear these are just natural disasters that have always taken place. And while, spoiler alert, climate change absolutely does have a crucial role in the disasters we're seeing, honestly, neither of these perspectives really do justice to what we know and what we don't know. So this video is for anyone who actually wants to understand what's going on with the devastating tropical cyclones we've been seeing. And if you appreciate actually understanding how the climate is changing and what we can do about it, you might want to make sure you're subscribed. And for those of you watching this in the future, there's loads of science in here that's relevant to all storms like these, not just the ones in 2024, so don't go anywhere. Technically, isn't everyone watching this in the future? Oh, you know what I mean. But right now, understanding hurricanes has never been so important. Over the past years, we've seen such incredibly intense storms that some researchers have even suggested coining a new storm tier for Category 6 hurricanes to better warn people of the danger. And 2024 in particular has seen devastating tropical cyclones. As I'm making this, the US is still reeling from Hurricane Helene, which dumped 6 months worth of rain on parts of North Carolina, driving flash flooding that stranded vulnerable communities. The damage was so severe that the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, blew half its annual budget just over a week into the financial year. And then, hot on the heels of Helene, came Hurricane Milton, which tore through Florida, ripping up infrastructure. Together, these storms left millions without power and caused dozens of deaths. And it's important to point out that research suggests the damage from these storms can actually cause thousands of excess deaths in the years that follow. It's so hard with numbers and with facts to capture the true human cost of hurricanes like these. But for me, the accounts from people who had to leave everything behind, from those who had nowhere safe to go or no way of getting to safety, these bring home the harm these storms have caused for millions of people. And before we talk about what's driving these storms, I've already mentioned the two sides of the debate. They're caused by climate change. It's just natural. But the thing is, there is a third extreme perspective. The people who say, yes, they can control the weather. It's ridiculous for anyone to lie and say it can't be done. And yeah, that is a direct quote from far-right Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. And look, I guess there's a sense in which this is true if they means fossil fuel companies and control means knowingly shift. Yeah, but that's clearly not what she means by those words. No, indeed. And so it's worth emphasizing that there's absolutely no technology that could cause storms like these, and absolutely no evidence of intent to do such a thing. It's
We're about to get into
our class. It's melding very
about
well
that.
today. So the thing that I wanted to point out is these storms. They used to call them 100-year storms, but we had 200-year storms within 2 weeks. And then, you know, the devastation, all of that. And then, you know, the whole talk about, you know, what is the cause of these, you know, horrific weather events. And so we had the hurricanes, the tornadoes, the flooding. We've had heat waves that have been killer heat waves. And then for people to say they stole the FEMA money, they created this storm. The Democrats created this storm. I'm just clearly I'm speechless.
Okay.
What about you, honey?
Like I said, we're about to get into some of that.
Okay.
And so,
so this is like a preamble, huh?
Well, it does show how we are in the midst of things and how we have to be God-minded and understand the gospel as we proceed through these times. And that we can't get around it. So we're going to have to deal with it, you know?
Okay, well then.
And we asked the question. I'm ready.
Okay, well, we're going to let Gap News go.
Yeah.